so I'm here today with Marius, the co-founder of Kamino and Hubble. This is well overdue. Welcome, Marius.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. I can't believe it's taken this long, but we're here now. And let's just tell the listeners, like, firstly, what is Hubble, what is Kamino, and then we'll get stuck into like what you guys have been shipping lately.
Yeah. By the way, thanks for inviting me. We were just speaking earlier that I was aware of the Cove in 2021, and when I did the first one on Breakpoint, and that's when we started working on Hubble. And I was thinking, hopefully one day I can get to this podcast. But like now I made it. But the Hubble is basically a stablecoin protocol in Solana. You can mint USDH against a basket of tokens: Sol, MSol, staked Sol, wrapped Bitcoin, wrapped ETH, and you can just use it across DeFi. And it kind of started in 2021 as an idea. We thought Solana needs a decentralized stablecoin, and as we launched in 2022, we saw all sorts of issues with trying to scale a stablecoin. And one of the issues was liquidity. If you have a stablecoin that you can mint and you have the nice mechanics of interest rates and collateralization ratios, etc., liquidation mechanisms, etc., it's all really nice and good. But if you don't have liquidity, if people can't swap that stablecoin for something else, then it's basically useless. A stablecoin, the hardest thing about a stablecoin is the liquidity. And there are all sorts of issues with it. And we found a way to solve that by launching another protocol called Kamino, which aims to optimize liquidity for different trading pairs. And essentially, Kamino was born out of a need to scale Hubble. And then it just took a life of its own and has multiple other use cases. So just to double down on Kamino is at the moment is a yield vault strategy protocol. So you can deposit tokens and it optimizes yield by depositing them in different dexes. You can have stable only yield vaults, you can have Sol only yield vaults, and you can have volatile yield vaults with all sorts of customizations. And more things are coming soon, but that's later. But at the end of the day, Kamino is like the yield vault page, one of the main yield vault pages in Solana.
Got you. I'd like to just quickly diverge us a little bit. I'm just curious. We're chatting right after Breakpoint, and there was a lot of news out of Breakpoint. It was really an incredible event, and I'm just curious to get your take on. I think that Jupiter announced a leveraged stablecoin, which is collateralized by leveraged Sol or something around that. Do you have any just a quick take on that and what your thoughts are there?
I wish them the best of luck. It's
okay.
That it's basically what I said before. I think we need stablecoins. We definitely need decentralized stablecoins. I just saw recently that Circle is thinking to do IPO in 2024, which is going to bring even more regulatory scrutiny. So basically, every single person that uses USDC or has USDC or takes USDC as collateral in the protocol, every single one of them has basically the US government as a counterparty. And they have counterparty risk with the US government. So I definitely think we need good stablecoins. And if you can, stablecoins essentially are a synthetic asset that try to mirror the price of USD, right? So they can, the easiest way to do it is to back them by fiat because they have perfect redemption and arbitrage, so you don't have price fluctuations. But then that creates a risk with whichever bank holds that is your counterparty. And you can do it in a decentralized way. And a ton of mechanisms have been tried. And because you have to do something very complicated, you have to do quite a lot of trade-offs. And what Jupiter is proposing is, as far as I understand, they haven't released a lot of documentation about it, but basically a stable coin which you can mint against a Sol position. And that Sol position can be just Sol, or it can be some kind of looped Sol versus a staked Sol. So that's fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you back it by, as long as you can have some liquidation mechanisms and you can ensure like whenever things go bad, you can liquidate it. The hard thing about any stablecoin is scaling it and scaling it through liquidity. And I'm really curious to see how they're gonna do that. Of course, they're like the front page of Solana, right? That's what who Jupiter is. And that's good for customer acquisition, for retail acquisition, for all sorts of things. But scaling a stablecoin or like growing some liquidity pool is quite challenging. And we tried to do this for about 2 years. We learned a lot from the process. I want to see how they approach it.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's
And just to
I don't wish this on my I don't wish this on. It's not an
your worst
easy
enemies.
endeavor, basically.
Yeah,
well, not
got you.
quite, but even Dai had a very hard time doing it. And there was like an extremely path-dependent journey that they took to manage to grow Dai. And people look at Dai and they say, "Oh, it's just easy. I'm just gonna do a stablecoin backed CDP because it works." But that's not why Dai works. It's not because it's a CDP. It works for completely other reasons.
Yeah, got you. I mean, I think a stablecoin episode, it's a whole multi-hour discussion in itself.
Yeah.
And I think one like minor point to drive home for people who are maybe a bit less familiar with how stablecoins work and what you sort of alluded to is that like if it is say Circle, for example, where they have like collateral, say in a bank somewhere, then you have a greater risk, not a risk, but like there's always the possibility that your assets can be frozen on chain. Whereas like a truly decentralized stablecoin where the assets are all on chain, you potentially and often you won't have that risk, which is why you might hear like more diehard crypto people say that they prefer like I guess DAI, but the DAI was then collateralized by a lot of USDC at some point. I'm not sure what the latest data is there, but so that's why you might hear like old Bitcoin people or old Ethereum people be like, "No, I prefer like a bit riskier on-chain stables." Okay, so that stablecoin alleyway out of the way. Let's chat a bit more about Kamino because I know that's what you guys have been focusing on a bit more lately in terms of like the development shipping. So what have you guys shipped recently?
This year we have released kind of, let's call it like in 3 pillars. We've improved the types of strategies we offer. So we have basically fully on-chain market making strategies that have on-chain rules based on which they rebalance. We have something very interesting. It's going to come, so you can like basically people do it themselves, but there is something called like the auto expander, which can rebalance and minimize the permanent loss. It's really interesting, works very well for stable coins. And also something that we're about to release called Auto Drifter, which tracks very well the price of a staked sol. So when you have a sol staked sol pair, sol zero sol pair, sol m sol, you have like really nice like trend following algorithm that optimizes for fees but doesn't incur permanent loss. So like we spend a lot of time improving this, and we think these 2 strategies are going to be like core backbone of future products of Kamino. We worked on another product which we released about 3 months ago called Creator Vaults. So now anyone can go to Kamino and create their own vault, choose their own settings, and then you just set it, and there's like a set of bots that basically rebalance and take care of that strategy running. And it just collects fees, it rebalances whatever settings you choose. And at the same time, if you're like a fund or hedge fund or like you're an influencer and you have ideas, you can invite others to deposit into your strategy, and you can basically collect some fees from that. So people can invest into you, can kind of become like an on-chain manager. So there's a self-service process there. But the last and the biggest thing that we are about to release is Kamino Lend, which is a fully rewritten borrow lend market with a lot of automations on top that would allow people to leverage loop sol, which is something we discussed earlier, leverage loop sol to Jito sol or to M sol, will allow people to go long short by opening a collateral or borrow position against whatever asset they choose. And it will allow people to take all of these previous strategies we discussed as collateral. So let's say you have like sol, Jito sol, and it makes 10% a year, you'll take that as collateral and you can borrow against it and mint more of it. So essentially like the old style leveraged farming, but on concentrated liquidity pool, not on like, old style AMM pools. And yeah, that's basically the thing.
Just want
We're
to
about to release this like in a week or two. Yeah.
got you. I just want to make sure we're bringing everyone along from the ride, because I know there's some newer people in the ecosystem, and sometimes I get messages being like, is there like an introduction to something? And so the core Kamino product, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is like you create vaults, um, and then the vaults are deployed, say, on like Orca on the CLM pools. And the value add, like the big value add there is that when you normally deploy to a concentrated liquidity pool, you set the range and you have to manually reset the range. Otherwise, when it goes out of range, you essentially don't earn any fees. So, your level of profitability is like the amount of your expertise and your execution in ensuring that you stay in range to earn fees. And if I understand correctly, like what Kamino does is it automates staying in range as well as possible to ensure that you earn maximum fees. And I'm guessing that those products you mentioned a bit earlier, they're like sort of optimizations to ensure that your yield is as high as possible when you're in the vault. Is that about right?
Yeah. The thing is, there's no free lunch really. Like, you can't
Yeah.
really optimize for max yield because you don't know in which direction the market moves.
Mm.
So you can maximize for max yield to do as much liquidity on the current price range as possible.
Mm.
But if the market moves against you when you hold some inventory, then you incur a loss on that. And then if you rebalance, essentially you're buying higher, or you're like
Mm.
selling cheap. So Camino doesn't really solve that. That's something that nobody can really solve. You have to do hedging,
Mm.
etc. What Camino does is just creates automations for people to decide how to create their own strategies based on what market views they have. And we
Okay.
have a set of predefined strategies that are optimized for specific things. But at the end of the day, the people have to still choose what vault is best for them. There's like low risk vaults that are basically stablecoin exposure only. There is
Mm.
Sol only vaults that are set and forget Sol yield vaults only. But there are strategies that can earn much more fees. They have like a good revenue stream. Let's say you have like Sol USDC, the most traded pair in Solana, and that one can print really good fees. But Solana is a volatile asset, so if they catch you on the wrong side, you can incur a loss, and that's called impermanent loss. Camino can't solve that. Nobody, not
Yeah.
even any market maker can solve that. That's just a law of the market.
Yeah, was it Bancor or one of the Ethereum? They tried to solve that,
Yeah,
and I think in the end it didn't work very
yeah,
well.
not at all.
If you
Yeah,
don't know what impermanent loss is, we won't cover it here, but you should look it up and you should understand it before you deploy into a pool.
yeah, and
Um,
basically these
mhm.
vaults, they're like automated strategies. They have different risk profiles. They work for different markets and different appetites. But because we have now we're launching Kamino Lend, which is basically a generic borrow lend market. You can either increase your exposure to these vaults if you want to optimize that yield or more fees, and you can also hedge them. So, for example, you have some USDC Sol vault, and basically have Sol exposure, right? If Sol goes down, they catch you on the wrong side because half of it is usually in Sol, and Sol goes down, you incurred price price risk on the Sol asset. And then, but you can short it. You can basically borrow Sol to deposit to your LP. So on your overall position, you have short Sol exposure and you have long Sol exposure. So then you can achieve some sort of hedging for your position. So in that case, you can try to neutralize the market risk while still collecting fees. It required some automation there. Also, you can also do it manually, but basically now these two primitives, which have like long, short, long any asset, short any asset, LP, and make fees from volume. Now, when you combine them, you can have all sorts of combinations that can give basically like very DeFi savvy people something good. But also it opens up the possibility for automating it out of the box. So give people like straight out of the box, like delta neutral positions.
So, am I also able to say deploy into Kamino and then lend out the pool tokens, for example, in the borrow lend?
No,
No.
there's no real motivation for it. We don't know if there's any. I don't know who would want to borrow it from me. That's basically the thing. Like, yeah,
Yeah, that
why
makes
not?
sense.
You
That
can
makes
let it.
sense. What
There's
about like, are you able to say mint USDH against the pool tokens?
Yeah, you'll be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So
USDH is
in
gonna be
that
one of
sense,
the assets.
you'd be earning the yield on the two pool tokens as well as then on the USDH if you're lending that in the borrow lend.
But you're borrowing USDH, so you're not lending it.
Ah, yeah, I see, I
So
see, I
you're
see.
paying
Okay.
interest rate when you borrow.
Ah, okay, okay. Interesting. Yeah, there'll be lots of fun to play around with the borrow lend once
Yeah,
it goes live, I'm sure. Um, okay, and just before we move on, because I'm curious to get your take on like Solana more generally and how you've held conviction in Solana through the dark periods. Before we go there, I'm just curious as we cap off like Kamino, um, who do you see as like the main user of Kamino? Are they more advanced sort of professionals, or is it also retail?
yeah. We thought a lot about this. I definitely do think that for DeFi savvy users, this is the perfect product.
Mm.
Um, if you're someone that you have to really understand all of these risks, and you have to be able to consciously, go there knowing what to expect. Which is kind of something similar to like finance. Like not all of my friends, just thinking like in real world, like not all of my friends just buy stocks and ETFs or like 2x Nasdaq leveraged ETFs. Like very few of my friends really do
Mm.
that. And the people that do that, they know what they do. They've worked in finance before. They specifically search for this sort of thing. Um, that's a perfect user for Camino. Um, but there are also like very like low risk, crypto adjusted, right? Risk products that someone that we want to dabble in could also take advantage. So you'll be able to do stable only vaults, that's fine. Sol only vaults, that's going to be okay. And also just lending out. There's going to be people borrowing on this market and creating demand and creating interest rate for
Mm.
lenders. So if you want to just purely lend, that's also going to be a low risk investment for people that are less like crazy advanced DeFi users.
Got you. I like how you said crypto adjusted, low
Yeah, I
risk
mean,
crypto adjusted.
yeah,
Yes,
it's like
at the end of the day,
it.
crypto is definitely there's some risk, and I think the bankless guys say we're on the frontier, so you have to take that into mind.
Yeah, like I mean, it's the same kind of the problem with crypto and the risk in crypto is that everything is irreversible, right? So
Mm.
um, in TradFi, if there's some issue, like I think we saw like a few years ago when like the London stock exchange or like metal exchange, they had like some crazy price fluctuation. Someone like had like extremely bad debt. Someone had like was making a lot of money. They just reverted the transactions. They were like,
Mm.
whatever, we're not gonna count this. Shut off the market for 2 days. People complained. Okay, go talk to our lawyers, and that was it. But in crypto, if anything goes bad, it's irreversible. You can't undo the transactions, and the guy just leaves immediately, bridges to Ethereum, goes to Tornado Cash, and you never hear from him again. So it's just completely different, wild west situation. What's going on in crypto when it comes to risk?
Unless, and this is my segue, unless he is running an exchange that starts with F and ends with X, and then he goes to jail for a very long time. So let's talk about Solana through the dark bear period, and I'd love to hear like maybe what initially sold you on building on Solana, and then like how you maintained your conviction through the last 2 years.
Um, I mean, there was no like strike of inspiration when I joined Solana. I just wanted to write Rust, to be honest. I
Mm.
come from a C++ background, and I just had it with C++. I just could not take any more C++, and I just wanted to write some Rust, and I saw the Solana hackathon. And in 2021, there was like a Solana season hackathon, and I started writing some Rust, and I just loved it. And then like thoughts came to my mind, all right, how is this? What does it mean? What's the implication? Is it interesting? Of course, there was a raging bull market, and that definitely helped. And and I at that time I was talking to some guy on Discord who was in TradFi for a very long time, and he was sharing like his thoughts about Solana, that it's really good for high frequency trading. It has order books, everything that you see in ETH, the slowness, the problems, the fees, make things prohibitively expensive or actually technically impossible. And he just sold me on Solid. But I didn't have any maximalism because I didn't have like any preconceived notions about the chains. So there were like a few boxes that got checked in my mind, and I was like, okay, this is very cool. I'm just gonna explore it. And then you just like with my co-founder decided to build it, and we launched. And then about I think in May, like hell started unleashing. We had like well, even before that, Solana had like outages, and you just had like
Sure.
liquidations. So the chain went down. You had
The mango hack happened at
3AC,
some point.
Luna, yeah, Mango hack, Solana went down, then the FTX, and then Solana went down again, and that's kind of like the last black swan, and it was just pure pain,
Yeah.
because let's say people were dunking on you, and when they dunk on you, you know, it's like it's a bear market, so you can't really prove them wrong, you know. And then the users were leaving, and it was really unclear to know if the users were leaving because Solana was bad, or the users were leaving because it was just a bear market and there was nothing interesting to do on chain. So it was a period when basically every single VC, and it was like also the L2 narrative, right? So it was a period when every single VC was asking, have you considered going to Arbitrum? Have you considered building on an L2? Why are you still staying on Solana? Everyone's leaving Solana. There were people who were like just not funding Solana. And Cosmos, there was like Solana L2 on Cosmos, you know, so there were like alternatives. There was Sui Aptos. There were just all sorts of things that basically looked way better than Solana on from a public perception point of view and narrative point of view. And we just after every single call we had with the VCs, with other chains trying to, you know, convince us, we just basically sat down and we thought, we just took it from basics. You know, we said, there's just no chain that can do what Solana has done. If you want to have like a proper chain, you need something like Solana, like parallel state machine, good synchronization between nodes, that can scale based on internet speed and hardware. I think that's just basic. I mean, I go by those assumptions. And then if anyone is going to try to do what Solana did, similar, they will have to run into the same issues. They will have their own growing pains of like running into all sorts of like unexpected edge cases when the network is at scale. So I was like, there's no point to start something earlier just because it's similar but has not had the problems, because they will run into their own issues. And actually that happened. Like I think Aptos or Sui actually had their own outages because they were starting to scale. So Solana is just
and the L2s as
earlier.
well.
Right. Yeah. But at that point, nobody really knew, you know, so you were kind of counting on your first principles thinking. And the last point was, who were the teams that would push the protocol forward from these other alternatives? And there's just simply nobody credible apart from Toli and Vitalik. I just don't seem to see any single leader that can rally a community and also be technically extremely literate or like expert to be able to push it when stuff happens. So, you know, when Solana had the scaling issues in 2021 with the spam, with the NFT spam, they came up with quick on the spot, you know. It was like no fluffing around, you know, they implemented it immediately. So you really need someone that has a combination of skills, and there's just extremely few people that do that and are like you know, chain leaders. And we just thought like, okay, we spoke with this guy, but he's not Toli. Like we can't. They will not be able to bring a community together. And you also need a community because you need builders. You can't have just like a nice chain with VC money, but no builders because the builders have to be inspired, you know. And you also need someone to run. That's just crypto. And these are all the things that were going through our minds. And every single time we were like just on the edge, like just completely unsure because Solana it was a tough time for being in Solana. We were like, I don't know, we just have to wait it out. Let's just give it 6 more months. Let's give it 1 more year. And then we'll make the decision again. And in the past few months, we started seeing that that just FUD narrative correct and feel good again. So that
Yeah.
was, it was really difficult.
Yeah, it felt, I think the early months of this year, if you were deep in the Solana community, it was a strange um, cognitive dissonance, I think maybe the term. Like, it was a strange feeling because everything you would read on Twitter from outside of that core community was so out of date and so incorrect. It felt like you were way ahead of the curve and you had alpha, but it was like it was publicly available, and anyone who did a bit of checking and would just use the chain could see that the product was working really well, and that the community was very strong. And it feels like in the last month or two, it's starting to kind of drop, and maybe that information asymmetry is starting to close. But we'll go into that shortly because it's been pretty vigorous on Twitter lately. But that's really good to hear. That conviction is sort of, you feel it's paid off, and I completely agree. And I think one thing that's is really not talked about enough is, like, everyone talks about how good Tolly is as a technical leader, and how important his technical chops have been to like the DNA of Solana being around, being as fast as possible, as what does he say, like global state at the speed of light. But I think that one thing which is perhaps a little bit underrated is also his like personality and his ability to be like a bit above the argument. Like, even when I talk to people on the east side, they always say, like, even if they don't like some of the popular, like, Mert or popular people in Solana, they say like, oh, I totally respect Tolly though. Like that, and that's something that people always say. And I think it's the same with Vitalik as well. You won't find anyone in Solana community who says Vitalik is like anything negative about Vitalik, especially after he wrote that very generous tweet at a very difficult time in the Solana history. So I think, yeah, just want to double down on the fact that I think like also Tolly as a leader is very unique, and that kind of helped. It sounds like the cult thing to say, but I think that really does help.
Yeah, it's a bit,
push.
man. I mean, it's crypto, So the thing is that everyone has an online, like a Twitter persona. Um, it's like a town square, You're not like, there's a lot going on. So these are the effects that we see, like cult-like mentality, herd mentality,
and humans are susceptible to that, full stop, right? I mean, that's religion. That's people get religious about like Apple versus Android, and all, anything which is like a large few brands, people tend to rally around. So it's not super surprising, really. But and that kind of also segues us nicely into the next topic, which is, we have kind of come through a dark period, and now I think people in the Solana community feel pretty confident, and they've been sort of pushing back very vigorously in the Twitter space. And we're seeing a lot of like vigorous debate, should we say, between ETH maxis, quote unquote, and Solana maxis maybe as well. What's your take on this like current moment on the timeline? How would you read it?
I think it's so. So basically, like back in last year, Solana didn't have like a good advocate or like good vocal advocates. People would just dunk on you, and there'd be like no rebuttal, and it would be like you'll lose easily, and that affects you mentally, because if you build a protocol or if you work in Solana, your existence or like a lot of your life depends on that, So there was a lot of pain and like violence against the Solana community. And we had people like Mert that actually started speaking out, and it encouraged others to do so, and then that created a snowball effect. And it's kind of what's happening right now. The big clash between Solana and ETH people is that to some extent is just correcting bad narrative that people intentionally do it on Twitter. Like, I saw this like Twitter is like, if you try to analyze startups from like the 7 sins point of view, like Tinder being last, for example, then Twitter is rough. Like people go on Twitter to just rant. So it's just the nature of the space to do that, and people just go to Twitter to talk, to dump their thoughts. And but a lot of it is Solana kind of trying to do some revenge, because we've been dunked on so unfairly, for the past year, that it's you have to like redeem yourself a little bit by claiming your wins, and the price speaks, and you have like this like such an easy narrative right now that you can just easily dump on the people that are on the wrong side of it. And yeah, it's kind of a bit of a redemption, a bit of like trying to convince people, but at the end of the day, it's something that I think it's like extremely reflexive. Like you have to believe it or like make it happen um, through convincing people. So the more you speak and the more you talk to people, the more people you can convince, the more devs join the community, the more VCs believe in it, the more VC funding funds devs. And it's a positive feedback loop. And that feedback loop, you have to kickstart it, Otherwise, it's just downward spiral, which is what happened the year before. So now we just turn it around and it goes the other direction. So you have to keep the momentum. And it's important for Solana to have this great community because it creates all of the positive effects. So to one extent, it's like, okay, let me just go and run. But to another extent, it just makes complete business sense to do it, to bring people to build on Solana. So that's kind of what's happening. Yeah. And there's like, just
Yeah.
like guilty pleasures of dunking on, like bad takes.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, we all know this. If you've been in crypto for a while, you know that narratives are super important. And so, if a certain narrative is continually being perpetuated, which is inaccurate, you can say just build, but it's very difficult to build long term if there's really negative narratives constantly around what the chain that you're building on. So we've had like a good few weeks, and obviously if you're in Solana, it's been a very good few weeks, I think. But we've had a good few weeks in crypto. Like Bitcoin's been doing quite well. I'm curious to get your take, like as we are potentially, I don't want to call it yet, but as we are potentially coming out of the bear market, like which parts of crypto are you still excited by? And like maybe you can even think about this question, like if you weren't working in Hubble and Kamino, like where would you then focus otherwise?
Um, I think crypto, people don't really see of it as more like just a technology that is just a wrapper on top of the entire world. So crypto is not just like shitcoin trading. It can be everything. It's just another technology
Mm,
layer on which you can put a lot of things. Um, so it can apply to everything, right? So I think generally crypto is just a huge design space, right? Imagine you just had the internet and you can do things. You can do it for gaming or you can do it for like, build Uber. So I think crypto is the same. Um, I think it's the same way how we finally were able with the internet to bring all the data in one place.
mm,
With crypto, we can bring all the assets in one place, right? Because crypto is just one giant ledger where all the assets are recorded, right? So you'll be able to have all kinds of assets tokenized on a unified ledger, and they can mean different things. If it's like some financial thing, you'll be able to do like DeFi on it. If it's some like art thing, you'll be able to do NFTs, or you can just do real estate. I think it's a huge, wide design space, and I think people are working on all verticals to improve that, from tokenization and legal point of view to onboarding to like wallets, um, and DeFi stuff. And I have no idea what other use cases there are, but I think more and more will be created because it's just like one giant unified computer. Um,
yeah.
so I'm just excited about the whole thing. Like I just think there's like a whole economy is created on a unified ledger. Like you're finally able to break down this fragmentation and just unify the entire or like the entire world on a single database or like a single ledger that there's nobody controls, and you can just deploy code and do something with it. So I like all of it. Of course, I dig finance. I think it's just some passion. I used to work in finance for quite a few years, and I like the maths of it. And like it's for me, it's interesting. I think it's like a useful um, support system for the world economy. You need finance because otherwise you go back to barter. But a lot of things are cool. I just don't want to work on that. So I want to work on DeFi. I really like that.
Yeah, got you. I mean, shout out to, for example, the Sling Wallet team. I mean, some of the consumer facing apps at Breakpoint, we've seen nothing like that. I think on other chains, it really is. It's good to finally see the only possible on Solana starting to become more and more true, and I hope that continues over the next 6 months and year. Um, Look, Marius,
Oh
this has
yeah,
been such a pleasure to have you.
one last
Okay,
thing. Sorry, yeah,
let's go for it.
about this thing. This all. I just realized this the other day when I saw like this like the latest latest podcast from Austin, a validated one.
Mm-hmm.
I think, um, and I just realized like there's just not one single person in Solana working on scaling. Nobody is building
Mm.
scaling solutions. Nobody is like stressing out about, oh, I can only do 5 TPS. Let me just optimize that, and taking that as an excuse to do 1 year of engineering resources on like some scaling thing or on L2 or something. Nobody's complaining about that. I mean, there are like issues on the edges, but everyone is doing grinding towards product market fit. Like everyone's trying to put out
Mm-hmm.
ready to use products for consumers or for whatever consumer, whatever target market they have. And I think that's huge because you can finally do iteration and real feedback and onboarding. You have a positive feedback loop, You don't have like you deploy something and then you run into fees or scaling problems, and because of that, you have to like spend another year and the customer, you lost him, Um,
It's also just like from a product manager perspective, like your design space for new products is more open. You have less restrictions in terms of what you can ship. Completely agree, and I think that's actually a really good point. I mean, I was at ETHCC recently, or not recently, a while back, and you were as well. And I think you'll probably agree that like it was actually surprising how many projects were in some way related to infrastructure or scaling or etc., and not focused on end users. And so, yeah, we will definitely have to see how that sort of plays out in the next 2 years. Do Solana teams, are they able to just iterate much faster towards getting product market fit? And we'll see. I mean, I've
and
seen
they'll
some
have
ETH
more
people
users.
even, yeah, I've seen some ETH people highlighting this problem as a you know, potential problem that there's too much like there's too many sort of development questions that are not related to actually shipping the product. And the more app chains and different L2s there are, the more that may becomes more complex. But we'll have to see how it plays out over the next year or two. It definitely seems like a plausible. I mean, it's already an issue, and we'll see how they take how they sort of
But
overcome it.
imagine, right? You're not. Well, now like the FUD is behind, and hopefully everything is good, and like we're losing that, and I think just there's a lag behind, like user people perception and the actual technical blah blah. But I think you'll no longer have drop off because of the chain of or because of fees. You just no longer have that drop off. So that
Mm.
means you have way more data points and feedback from real users about how to iterate on your product. And I think that's huge. I don't think, and like, for example, you look at like ETH protocols and you think that, oh, they have 5 billion in them. That means they have chief product market fit. But actually, there's like just a few whales that got rich from like ETH, mooning. How do you have, how, and it's a product market fit for like those very few, like receptive group of people. But Solana can completely onboard everyone. And you can, it's just a whole new design space. So let's just see what people come up with. And
And here it's worth
yeah,
mentioning, I think it was Ben Sparango who highlighted like a different way of looking at the chain in terms of usage, like rather than considering pure TVL, total value locked, which is like the amount of capital or the amount of value which is locked inside protocols, to think about like the velocity of that TVL and like how often it's essentially kind of changing hands and moving around. And like at the end of the day, would you rather have a chain with a lot of TVL but not much actual activity, or a chain with less TVL but a high amount of activity because it's very useful for the people who are using that chain? So that's definitely another one to keep an eye on. And now you've just reminded me. I was going to do the outro, but now you've just reminded me that I'm also very, very bullish on the possibility of crypto in general and Solana even more so to become like an interface for AI to then perform actions, and in that situation, I think you really value like low fees. I mean, already people who would be making like trading bots, for example, I'm sure that they value like low fees because that's more money in their pocket essentially. And if you think about like if you're running multiple different sort of AI for certain use cases that are automated, then I'm sure again that like if you're looking at the profitability at the end of the month, the fees will be a big factor. And crypto lends itself nicely to AI because it is digital native. You don't have to worry about like KYC and different credit card chargebacks, etc. But we'll see. Like the very early days there, we'll see how that plays out as well.
Yeah, I can see how you can deploy different models on chain, but they're still really heavy, so I'm not fully
Yeah.
sure. I know that Filecoin has made a lot of progress here.
Okay.
They basically like, yeah, Filecoin is like this. They were like just storage, right? And then they launched an L1. So now they have smart contracts, and there's all sorts of things they're trying to do with respect to data. So I think they're gonna lend nice to AI itself as well. I'm not a huge
Nice.
AI expert myself. I'm a big user, but
No, me
I
neither.
don't have
Me
vision.
neither.
Yeah.
We're just doubling our beak in that one. So, Marius, it's been a real pleasure. If folks want to follow you on Twitter, you said it before the show started. You've been doing some shit posting lately. So, if folks want to see those shit posts, where can they find you?
There's a Twitter handle called Y2KAPPA, Y2Kappa.
Okay,
And what you see there is take it with a grain of salt.
with a grain of salt, yeah. And otherwise, I'm sure you can find Kamino and Hubble also on X or Twitter, however you prefer to call it. Again, Marius, it's been a real pleasure. I'm really glad we finally got to have this conversation, and we can check back in next year and see how things are coming along.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually really happy this finally happened. See you next year.